Okay. All right. Welcome, everyone. So today we are going to talk about the Noble Eightfold Path. And once again, it's really only going to be an outline, but hopefully good enough outlines so that you can build up on it using references and along the way. And we are always reminded that this is a gradual teaching. So it slowly deepens over the years and your practice matures over the years. So this is just a little starting point. Okay. Now, this is of course the final talk in the series for New Buddhist Q&A Series. And I'll just go back to the third session briefly, where I outlined the Four Noble Truths. In it he gives an outline into which all of his teachings fit. So he lays out this framework which is very clear, and all the discourses that came after elaborated or elaborates some aspect of the Four Noble Truths. Now, the first noble truth is dukkha, or suffering. It actually has a very wide meaning, from obvious grief and loss, that's really obvious, all the way to very subtle states of dissatisfaction, so suffering characterizes an inherent part of human existence. The second noble truth is the origin of dukkha, or craving. And craving, of course, is in turn due to ignorance, our ignorance of the basic characteristics of existence. Now, the third noble truth is the cessation of dukkha, or nibbana. So the Buddha explains that craving, when it is relinquished, leads to the cessation of dukkha and to, therefore, nibbana. In other words, there is a way to overcome suffering. There is a way from suffering. And that is described in the fourth noble truth, where he outlines the path leading to liberation, which is called the Noble Eightfold Path. The Buddha discovered this path for himself. He didn't invent it. He uncovered this path and he walked the path and he attained enlightenment. And then he taught this path, very systematic teaching, so that others could also follow the path and experience for themselves the state of liberation that he experienced. So let me scroll down a bit now to the Eightfold Path in summary form. Be developed, and when they are mature, you achieve the wisdom of liberation. The 8 path factors are listed there, First, right view, then right intention. Those two are called wisdom factors. Now this, interesting to note, all of them have this prefix, right view, right intention, so on. This is a translation of the word from Pali, which is samma. And this right has a specific meaning, actually. So right view has within it wholesomeness as well as the direction to liberation. So that is the direction that we are taking in this, wholesomeness which leads to liberation as the ultimate goal. So let's start from the first path factor that the Buddha described. Now, it's strange because right view, in summary, is actually the Four Noble Truths. So we begin with a basic kind of right view, and we end up with the deep, profound penetration of the Four Noble Truths, which is enlightenment. So this right view is kind of the beginning and the end, in a sense. But right view is necessary for us to start the path and to stay on it. And initially, it's a very basic understanding of suffering, that there may be causes for this, that there may be a way out of this. And quite often, people come to a spiritual path because there has been some trauma or tragedy or great loss in their lives. And there's this feeling that I'm suffering so much. Is there some other way to live that will help me to avoid this? So suffering leads us to the First Noble Truth, which in turn is necessary for us to get on this path. Of course, later, as all the other factors are developed, the right view matures into a deep and intimate, immediate understanding of the Four Noble Truths. See, initially we have a conceptual understanding, but through the practice, this Eightfold Path actually leads you to enlightenment. There is another aspect of right view, which I should mention, and that is that we have to have an inkling of the understanding of law of karma. In other words, unwholesome and wholesome volitional actions lead to corresponding results. And it leads to those results in this life, but also in the cycle of samsara, birth and death. Now, we come across these words, unwholesome and wholesome, a lot. This whole path is about developing wholesomeness. So I'm going to elaborate it a little bit. Unwholesomeness, unwholesome volitions are motivated by the three roots: greed, hatred or ill will, and ignorance. These are the three things that keep us bound in samsara. On the other hand, wholesome volitional actions are motivated by the opposite: generosity, loving kindness, and wisdom. And they are the very things that, when developed, help us to liberate ourselves from samsara. So you'll hear more about wholesomeness in a bit further down as well. The second aspect of wisdom factors is right intention. So it's like setting the mind in a certain, like a compass, in a certain, leaning it in these three directions. The intention to renunciation, which of course overcomes greed. The intention to loving kindness, which overcomes ill will and hatred. And then the intention to non-harm, which is similarly, it's compassion which overcomes hatred. So with that right intention, when opportunities come up, the mind starts to be inclined in those directions, and you can cultivate that. So loving kindness, for example, might be very difficult for some people in some situations. We might have a grudge against somebody and it's really, you really want to get back at this person or whatever. But when there is that intention and you're trying to cultivate, you might see some other options. You might want to mitigate that strong feelings of ill will. So right intention, renunciation, loving kindness, and non-harm. Then we come to the next three, which is developing virtue. We covered all this in the 5 precepts, which are observed by lay Buddhists as the foundation for their practice. That is, to refrain from killing, refrain from stealing, refrain from sexual misconduct, refrain from false speech, and refrain from using intoxicants. So those are the 5 precepts, the basic ethical guidelines that underpin our practice. Here, the Buddha starts the virtue segment with right speech, and it elaborated more in that it means avoiding false speech, harsh speech, divisive speech, and idle chatter. Now, you can say something quite truthful, but then you have to question yourself, is this the appropriate time to say it? Is this person ready to hear this? So it requires quite a bit of mindfulness, quite a bit of awareness. Otherwise, we can do a lot of damage with speech. When we do intensive meditation retreats, we actually observe noble silence. So nobody speaks to anybody. And this is actually quite a wonderful opportunity to see how the mind, without this input of chatter, how the mind settles to a peaceful state. So of course we can't live like that in day-to-day lives, but that's just as an example of speech and its impact on our mind state. The next one, right action. Here in the teachings, what's mentioned is refraining from killing, refraining from taking what's not given, and refraining from sexual misconduct. Now, those 3 start at a very basic level. So, for example, refraining from killing. That's your basic. But then from there it develops to all the way to loving kindness towards all beings. So, like that, refraining from stealing, that also matures towards generosity. Like avoiding of sexual misconduct, this leads to developing restraint of sensual desire, for example. So all these things start at a very basic level, and then it becomes more mature, more developed, more refined. Then right livelihood kind of incorporates all of this in a way. As lay people, we have to generate some way of supporting ourselves through our livelihoods. And essentially, we are advised to choose a livelihood which doesn't cause injury to self or anyone else and does not involve any kind of deception. Specifically, the Buddha mentioned those 5 types of trading to avoid. The first one is meat production, as a butcher, hunter, fisherman. Trading in living beings, slavery, prostitution. Trading in intoxicants, poisons, weapons. So you can see that these are all livelihoods that unfortunately generate a lot of harm to others, a lot of suffering. So it will not promote your progress in the Eightfold Path. Then we come to the third set of the Eightfold Path, which is meditation or samadhi. And a lot of people are attracted to the Buddhist teachings because of meditation, because of the emphasis on meditation. Now, so the first of these is right effort. It's interesting because in the teachings we are told that this path requires energy and effort. And it's not for those of us who are lazy. So, right effort emphasizes this need for energy. But very specifically, the effort is to do 2 things: to increase wholesome mental states and to decrease unwholesome mental states. So, as I said, we'll come back to this notion of wholesome and unwholesome. So, if you can see, you're aware that you have some wholesome mind state. For example, wanting to understand the Eightfold Path, there's already a wholesome mind state generated there. So then we try to maintain that wholesome mind state. We try to further nurture that mind state. And if such a wholesome mind state has not arisen, we try to generate that. So, for example, generosity might be an act of giving something to somebody who needs some kind of assistance. And you can see the joy in your own mind of being able to have assisted someone. So this is a wholesome act, a wholesome mind state, and you try to develop those opportunities. On the other hand, with unwholesome mind states, we try to prevent them from arising in the first place if we can, and then to reduce those unwholesome states when they have arisen. So reminding you that unwholesome states are related to greed, hatred, and ignorance. So an easy one to pick up is the unwholesome mind states related to hatred or ill will. So we notice when we're angry and we're really churning over about what they said about me and why and how unjustified it was, and this story goes on and on and on. And at some point you catch yourself lost in this story. And at that point you have the opportunity to say, hey, this is a lot of unwholesomeness that's been generated. Maybe there's another way to look at it. Maybe I could give it a break. You know, the awareness helps you to let it subside. And you can watch these mind states subside. Then, so you try also to avoid getting into situations where unwholesome thoughts arise. But that's also difficult because, you know, you might want to watch a TV program that's going to generate a lot of anger about, oh, why is this person running this country like this, and so on and so forth. So again, you have to bring some wisdom into it and see if that helps to understand the situation without the anger and the ill will. So right effort, yeah, it does take quite a bit of effort for us to stay on course with this path. And without right effort, it's difficult to develop right mindfulness and right concentration. Let's deal with right mindfulness now. We are very familiar nowadays with mindfulness because there are so many courses and people teaching mindfulness, which is good. So basically, mindfulness, in the Pali language it's sati, it refers to a bare awareness without desire or without rejection. So in other words, bare awareness without judgment. This way, we can see things or get closer to seeing things as they are rather than how we want to see them. Because we habitually wear these glasses which have greed, hatred and delusion on it, and we filter everything through this lens. So the right mindfulness helps us to detach, just stand back from that a little bit. It's actually very difficult, you will notice when you sit down to meditate or become aware of what's happening around you at any time. You see something and immediately, I like it, I don't like it. It just clicks in immediately, right? Or somebody says something and you think, oh, I don't want to hear that, I don't like it, so on. So the judgment comes in very quickly, you know. So with the practice of mindfulness, you see what you see or hear what you see. You also see the judgment that comes in. So you notice that and you let it be. You don't try to fight with yourself over that because then that creates another judgment. It's all about just noticing things as they are. So suppose you notice that there is a lot of anger about some issue. You hear somebody saying something and immediately you feel this anger rising. At that point, what you're doing, with mindfulness practice, you are just noticing it. That there's hearing and there's a reaction, there's an anger starting up. You're not trying to allay the anger or anything, you're just at this point in the practice of mindfulness, you're just noticing things as they are. Or you see some lovely food and immediately, oh, I want that, I would love some of that. And so you notice that, yeah? Seeing this delicious meal out there and the rising of desire for it. Notice both of those. So if you keep noticing it, you notice also that bit by bit you start to detach. You don't immediately jump to a judgment. You can watch that and see the judgments coming and going. And there's clarity in what you're seeing or hearing or thinking. And it's contrary to our normal way of awareness, which is very superficial. You know, we get a quick glimpse of things, it's superficial, and we base our judgments and decisions on that. Mindfulness allows you to see more deeply. And that is very helpful as you develop the practice to see the character of the nature of existence. Now, the Buddha gave a discourse, there were many, but this one discourse called Satipatthana Sutta, which is Foundations of Mindfulness. In this, the Buddha describes 4 domains which are the foundations for developing mindfulness. So those 4 domains are, 1, the body, then feelings, mind states and thinking, and then another category called phenomena, dhammas, which is a little bit harder to explain. But let's start with the foundation of body, but the body as the foundation for developing mindfulness. The most popular meditation object is the body, and of that, the most widely used is the meditation on the breath. Noticing the breathing in, the breathing out. Breathing in, breathing out. Just that movement of the chest or the abdomen, or the breath moving in and out at the nostril. So this is mindfulness developed based on the body. Then there are other subjects. For example, in our day-to-day lives, there's smelling, hearing, seeing, talking, various activities. And there can be mindfulness based on those bodily actions. So, hearing, you can hear various noises, sounds, and again you can see how you either incline towards it or away from it, or just be able to observe it. So if you're washing dishes, you notice the movements of your hands, the warmth of the water, and you place the dish back on the rack. All of this can be done in a way that builds up your mindfulness based on bodily action. So you can see how from the time you wake up to the time you go to bed is full of opportunities for developing mindfulness based on the body. Then, with the category of feelings as the foundation for building mindfulness, here the Buddha specifically looks at the overall feeling tone of an experience. Is this pleasant? Is it unpleasant? Or is it neutral? Just those three feelings. And so if you're doing something, you're eating something and it's very tasty, there's this pleasant overall sensation. So you notice the pleasantness, the pleasant sensation. Now, this is important because it gives you a little opportunity to just leave it at that and not to build it up into craving and clinging. Because those steps then take you to the unwholesome. If you can just enjoy your meal and say, oh, it's such a pleasant meal, such a pleasant experience, you notice that you have enjoyed it, you have this pleasant feeling, you leave it at that. So that helps to, in your practice of letting go of the craving, basically, and the clinging. Similarly, with unpleasant mind states, you have the opportunity, if you see that there is this unpleasant mind state has arisen, you notice that, unpleasant. And then you can just observe that without it developing into, oh, I can't stand this, I get this away from me, etc., etc. In other words, aversion growing there. You can stop that taking off. So then mind states. Here we can observe all sorts of emotional states, a lot of thinking. With thinking, it's really interesting when you start to watch your thoughts, because most of the times we have got totally lost in a story of what I'm going to do tomorrow, or what I did yesterday, or some other project. We have got totally lost, and then suddenly you stop just to watch the content of this thought, to watch that process rather than getting lost in the content. You can actually observe the act of thinking. Then you notice thoughts they're quite insubstantial. They come, they maintain for a while, and then they pass away. So this is a characteristic of phenomena. There's this impermanence, and you can see that if you are not lost in the story. So once again, that's it's an excellent foundation for developing mindfulness, because thinking is happening all the time. So you can just step into that framework where you just observe and use mind states for that purpose. The last one is a bit hard to explain, phenomena. The Buddha described a number of sets of phenomena which occur, which we can use for the purpose of developing mindfulness. So one set of phenomena is what we call the five hindrances. When we start to do formal practice in meditation, we immediately encounter one of the five hindrances: craving or sense desire, ill will, sloth and torpor, this drowsiness kind of sets in, restlessness and skeptical doubt. So these five they hinder the settling of the mind in your meditation. So these five hindrances we can notice when it's happening and be just mindful of that. So like that, there are a number of sets of phenomena the Buddha identified, including the Four Noble Truths. When they arise, being mindful of just that. So I might add one more there. The phenomena of this mind-body existence, which I call me, myself. The Buddhists pointed out that this mind-body phenomenon is actually made up of what he calls five clusters of phenomena. The first, if you're talking about the body, that's matter. So this body is one aggregate. Then the rest of the four aggregates are all mental or mind aggregates. So this is body, then you have the mind aggregates, the four, which are feelings, perceptions, thought formations, and consciousness. So you put all these five together, you get this. You get me. And we cling to this me based on those five aggregates. Because I have this body, because you have this body, because you have these thoughts and feelings and perceptions. This is me, you see. We cling to this sense of me. So it's very difficult for us to penetrate deeper into that, to see us in those five aggregates. So mindfulness of the five aggregates is another foundation of mindfulness. Then we come to the last of the 8 path factors, which is right concentration. And here, what we're trying to do is, rather than maintaining a general awareness, non-judgmental awareness, which you do in the mindfulness, this practice is actually getting the mind one-pointed, concentrated, a unified mind, which so the mind is focused on a wholesome object, which often, the most popular one, is again the in and out breath. Here, we don't follow the mind to other distractions. We notice that there is a distraction, and we try to encourage the mind back to the focus of the breath. And by maintaining the focus on this object, concentration develops. And even at a basic level, this is actually a really important part of the practice, because you then discover that you can tap into a source of happiness that doesn't depend on anything else. outside of you. Just by bringing the mind to focus on an object, you can generate this quiet peace and stillness. So that is a very handy gain from this path of practice. But it goes much deeper than that. When concentration is developed and at its peak, it goes into what we call absorption states, jhana states, where the mind is totally still. With the mind like that, mind in that state, when you come out of the absorption states, you can use that mind, the clarity of that mind, to penetrate deeply into the nature of existence. So that is really why it's being developed. But along the way, it's really nice to have it, because you've got this instant source of just a way of calming, instant benefit. So, but as I said at the beginning, right means this is all directed towards liberation. So it's that is really the aim, even ultimately, of deep meditative states. The Eightfold Path is not a sequential path, but all aspects are to be developed and they enhance each other. And initially you have benefits, there are wholesome outcomes in your life that you can see. But when the path factors are mature, when they're developed fully, it leads to awakening or wisdom of liberation. And that is through the direct insight into the three characteristics of existence, which are impermanence, suffering, and no self. And the direct realization of the Four Noble Truths. So this is the very experience of liberation that comes about if the path is fully developed. I think I've just covered the three characteristics of existence. Impermanence we kind of know at some level, we must know. Birth, disease, death, we know these things happen, we know life is impermanent. But in the profound realization of impermanence, what you notice is the moment-to-moment impermanence. And that's why you need the mindfulness and the concentrated mind to see that. And same with dukkha. You can see it at a gross level, but the very subtle levels of dissatisfaction, the moment-to-moment unsatisfactoriness becomes clearer with the development of the path. And that there is no permanent abiding self in all of this. That also, so for example, to see the five aggregates clearly, that requires the sharp, penetrative mind, which has to be developed through meditation. That's what I've gone through, the five aggregates of clinging to the notion of self. And finally, I've got here a list of references, which there's a lot on YouTube now, so you can get lost there. But Bhikkhu Bodhi did this course called A Short Introduction to Buddhism, where he deals with all of this in quite a comprehensive way, but it's still accessible. So I would highly recommend that. So I think I'll stop there. Thank you very much for your attention, and I'm happy to deal with if there are any questions.
I've got one question. Christian Geetha.
Yes, I'll
Should
give
I
you the
use
mic.
microphone?
Yes, use the microphone. Yeah.
I was going to say with the, you mentioned that 5 aggregates, which, oh sorry, thank you. Geetha, you mentioned the 5 aggregates, which include the yourself being matter, feelings, perceptions, well, there they are there, thoughts and consciousness. Is it possible to actually change who you are in a way through developing the right view, the right tension? So do you change your personality in a way? Is that a likely event?
That's a good question, because yes, this path has transforming power. It transforms you. You may not notice it initially. You might look back sometime down the track and you say, oh my goodness. Or people say to you, gee, you've changed. You're not how I used to know. You're not, jumping at everything. You're not taking everything to heart. You're able to, there's more loving kindness around you. So things change. So personal qualities change. So there is this huge transformative power in following this path. Yes.
And again at birth.
I'll just give you this.
And with everyone, there are the qualities you bring about by birth that's coming from your previous lives.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that also matters, like how much good karma you have had to understand the teaching.
Yes.
Like we always say about Ajahn Brahm, how he happened to get to know the Dhamma to teach us. Yeah, something like that.
Yes. So your previous lives and the karmic influences that you have developed also have that basis for you to use the Dhamma. And as you tread the path, yes, the transformations occur. Yes.
Just going on from that, can you come into this life with previous lives, you may have been, the most unwholesome person. So you're bringing that into this life. So that's kind of making it doubly hard for you, isn't it, as a person in this life?
Yes.
Because you've got all this, is it called ripening karma happening as well from previous lives?
Yeah.
So I find that a bit confusing.
It is. And, karma and how it bears fruits in this life or another life or further down the track. This is actually one of the things that the normal mind can't fathom. But there are examples, for example, in the teachings of Angulimala, this story where he, because of being misguided by his teacher, he actually sets out and kills about 1,000 people in order to get a finger from each one. So he had to have a chain with 1,000 fingers. Now, he was about to kill his mother for the 1,000th when the Buddha could see this. But because Angulimala had some karmic good qualities from past lives, the Buddha intervenes, knowing that this man is capable of enlightenment. So he intervenes before he kills his mother, because that is a huge, really weighty karma, to kill your mother. So he intervenes and he teaches the Dhamma to Angulimala. It's a beautiful story. So there you are, who has somebody, because of their previous karma, even though there was this hideous, unwholesome actions in this life, he was still able to attain Nibbana. But yes, from our understanding, if previous lives have generated a lot of unwholesome karma, it's going to make it difficult. And really, the reason why we have actually come into contact with the Dhamma is because of previous wholesome karma, which has kind of diverted us in these directions. So it's not, this teaching is not accessed by everyone. There's probably only very few people who access it and develop it to its full potential.
And practice.
And practice it, yeah.
Practice is the most important. Like when you're born to a Buddhist family, you are not Buddhist unless you practice.
Yeah.
You can, on the birth certificate, as Ajahn says, they can be Buddhist because the parents are Buddhist, but that doesn't mean they are.
You don't qualify.
They don't qualify, unlike.
That's right.
Again, you have to practice. In Buddhism, the results are achieved through practice. So, isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah, that's the way. There's a slight difference with other religions.
Yeah. I was going to say, like a baby that perhaps is born with good intentions and that, and it seems unfortunate in a way that they can fall from grace and experience sort of what you suggested, karma ripening at some point, even though they might have had good intentions and whatever in their sort of formative years, like, you know, up to a teenage point or whatever. And it's unlucky in a way, isn't it? That I hate to mention your name, that the people do fall by the wayside, and yet they started off as a delightful baby, and they've just had this fall from grace. It's hard to get your head around sometimes.
It is, yeah. And the Buddha's teaching is that not everything is attributed to karma. There are various other conditions also which affect the course of the trajectory of your life. Yeah. I can't remember the 4 factors. Okay, all right.
So
in other words, it's not everything is karmically determined.
It's not solely that, no.
There are other influences.
Other factors also affect.
Yeah.
Like if there's a tsunami, a whole lot of people die in that tsunami. They have been having that karma. That's how we believe. Isn't it? When people die in a hole.
Yeah. Because I was going to mention that, just the fact that a lot of this is aimed at the individual, but it's all designed to have an impact on the collective, like the society as a whole, by the sounds of it. Because when it comes across to Western societies who are more individualistic, you encounter problems straight away, because no matter what good intentions you might have, it's those around that it can impact on what happens.
Yeah, I won't. It's an observation. Yeah, as I said, it's so difficult to know what actually has been karmically affected and what's affected by other factors. But the essential thing is that we use. They say this is a precious human rebirth that we have. That we use that to the best of our ability to continue to walk this path, so that there is liberation from suffering in this life.
They say we have to make maximum use of this life.
Yeah.
Because it's a rare opportunity to be born a human, so you have to make maximum use.
It's a golden opportunity.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's why we come to meet people, like-minded people also. That's another advantage.
We can take one last comment, Anne.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Or a question.
With the 5 aggregates, the form being the matter, so I could, like I see this as my body, but I take my arm off and it's no longer part of me. I take the other arm off. This is the way I've been, sort of an example of how it works.
Yes.
So you can kind of, completely disassemble your body, and, you're not you anymore. You're just all bits and pieces, aren't you, of this thing that when you put it all together, it forms my body.
Yeah.
So how does that work with the feelings, perception, thoughts and consciousness? Because I can understand how you can pull apart the body.
Yes.
But I'm not sure about the other 4.
Well, the other 4, the mind factors, of course, depend on an intact of functioning body with a functioning brain and the organs that are required for it to function. So even the body, you can take it apart, but at some point it dies if you don't have the essential functioning parts to have a body there. But how do you take the others apart?
Because, I mean, they're not visible either, are they?
That's right.
Yeah.
Vipassana, you can experience it, can you?
Yes.
When you practice the
Yes.
Satipatthana, that's what you experience at the end.
You experience the momentary nature of this phenomena, and there's like a deconstruction that happens in your own observation. You can observe the deconstruction, in a sense. So we no longer then believe. You can say, yes, this is me, I'm Geetha, I'm doing this, but there is not that clinging to me, mine, because it's not like that. In reality.
Where the
In
non-self
reality.
come.
Yes.
Coming, non-self.
Yes.
That's when it comes in, right? You see? When you get that realization.
Yes, yeah. So it's difficult to explain because you have to have experienced it to be able to explain that, I would say. But the essential part is that we see experiences in their components rather than as a one whole, which is how we normally see things. We don't see the component nature.
No, definitely not. No.
So thank you for that, and I'm sorry I couldn't answer that question as well as I would like to, but thank you for coming and your questions.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you.
you.
Really great.
Okay, I'll just
What happened
switch
to you?
off the microphone.